Hi, everyone. I'm Pete Blackshaw, CEO here in Cincinnati's Over the Rhine district. And I'd like to welcome all of you to our first ever virtual version of the Cintrifuse annual meeting. We have a record number of attendees. This is also the kickoff for what we like to call Startup Cincy Week. And here we bring our entire community together to share, to learn, to network. We have 35 sessions, 60 speakers, and 2,500 anticipated participants. Another record, I might add. This has been a really hard year. We've been concerned first and foremost for our health and the health of our families and colleagues. We've been heartbroken by the impact that this crisis has had on so many people. At Cintrifuse, we've asked really hard questions. Can we get through this? With diminished revenue streams as we've closed Union Hall for weeks on end, and as we've worried about our corporate and city support, with hard choices about staff and whether we could sustain everyone. I've had my share of sleepless nights, and I know we all did. But through it all, there were very bright lights. For example, we turned our Union Hall into a thriving PPE factory. We kept hearing stories about frontline responders and caregivers that lacked protective gear. And so we asked our favorite question: what would we do if we were a startup? Within days, we opened up the beer hall, our biggest room, to 3D printing experts, Polar 3D. And with fundraising help from InfoTrust, another startup, we converted Union Hall into a 24/7 factory, churning out more than 30,000 masks. We delivered them to hospitals, nursing homes, Ronald McDonald Home as part of Children's, to fire departments and EMT teams. Another example, with social justice social justice brought thousands of people onto the streets, we opened our doors. We offered water and a place to sit down. We reminded ourselves that we're out to create a vibrant economy for all of us, not just some of us. We also reached out to the neighbors in our Over the Rhine district with a commitment to help them navigate the crisis. And here I want to remind everyone, this community still needs our support. We must join forces to kind of help our restaurants, bars, galleries, stores, small businesses survive and ultimately thrive. Most importantly, we at Cintrifuse supported our startups, and that is our core mission. We found virtual ways to help them stay engaged, to keep growing their businesses and the lifelines that they need. And our sponsors and partners found ways to keep supporting us, which is both empowering and incredibly validating. Through all of this, we were reminded that there is no mindset better suited to a crisis than the mindset of a startup. Scrappy, persistent, agile, a mindset that prizes speed, rapid prototyping, and failing to learn fast, a mindset that thrives on pivots. This is the soul of Cintrifuse, and it's the spirit of today's annual meeting. Now, I'd like to highlight a few achievements we can all celebrate. First, we made a record number of startup connections. We helped Contact CI raise an institutional seed round to complete their product development in haptic devices for AR, VR. We made over 100 connections between local startups and angel seed and Series A investments. Real estate game changer, HomeShake, just took residency next to us in Union Hall. Remember, Foresight is making real inroads in CPG. FISNA launched the first geometric search engine. Coterie just announced a partnership with Intuit. If you're a Cincinnati startup, we are eager to help. Our doors are open. And here I wanted to recognize, big shout out to Union Hall's Laura Hughes and Eric Weissman for what they do to meet member needs, keep our space healthy, and care for their colleagues. We're continuing to focus on so-called right to win areas, and the one big area cutting across branding, retail, health, and supply chain is sustainability. We are fielding major startup briefs for corporate partners, and we just launched in partnership with Flywheel Social Enterprise and HCDC, the Sustainable Cincy Virtual Startup Accelerator Program. We've lured major sponsors, including Kroger, P&G, Michelman, and even Nestle's food headquarters in Cleveland. Supply chains, we believe, are at the heart of resilience, renewal, and new growth. And we're chairing a regional committee on supply chain and new commerce involving Cintas, P&G, Kroger, CVG, DHL, and many, many others. A parallel task force is underway on health that's being led by Cincy Tech's Mike Venerable, and another on capital by Chad Sung. We have 3 supply chain focus areas: tech, future of freight, food from seed to plate, circular economy, and zero waste. We'll hear more about that shortly. We launched a FinTech webinar series with more than 400 participants. We received more than 50 applications for our FinTech Frontier pitch competition, where we will be awarding $60,000, I repeat, $60,000 in prizes later this week as part of Startup Cincy Week. We stepped up our focus on inclusive entrepreneurship, applying for a $10 million Equality Can't Wait grant and becoming a founding investor in Lightship Capital, the largest fund dedicated exclusively to minority entrepreneurs in the Midwest. And we'll hear from the founders in a moment. We transitioned our corporate innovation services to remote delivery and tested a whole new innovation sprint with recent fund investor AAA called Virtual VC Teardown, and received enthusiastic reviews. We also successfully piloted an innovation services in contactless experiences, and we'll soon launch a contactless experiences learning consortium. We're going big on virtual events. Our Signal collaboration with P&G, the startup experience, lured over 350 ecosystem attendees. We're taking a fresh look at Union Hall in this post-outbreak period. Future Lab, Virtual Training Center, Inclusive Tech Lab. Expect to hear more soon. We continue to invest in the world's most innovative VCs, material impact on sustainability, atomic labs and science around venture studio models, something our companies are really looking at. Our fund and our fund network have contributed to our regional economic multiplier of 6x. I repeat, 6x, which indicates the amount of capital invested in the Cincinnati region in relation to what we have invested outside the region since the inception of Cintrifuse. This includes VC rounds from Vinley, Listener, Navistone, and Picasso, which have broad participation from VCs in our network, like Graycroft, Madrona, Mavron, and Crosscut. And speaking of the fund, I'd like to recognize and thank Sarah Anderson, who has been the Cintrifuse fund manager for the last 8 years. Sarah and her family are going to be moving to Boulder next spring to begin an exciting new chapter in their lives. Sarah leaves a lasting legacy. She played a pivotal role leading and growing the fund, delivering stellar returns, and cultivating close relationships with our venture network. Cincinnati is absolutely on the VC radar in a way that didn't exist a decade ago, and for that we are deeply grateful, Sarah. Now, looking ahead, Cintrifuse was created nearly a decade ago to help ensure our future economic vitality. As 2020 comes to a close, that mission is more urgent than ever, which is what drives our theme for this meeting today and the year ahead. Pivot point: the ability to respond to the most extreme challenges and to create the future now. Perspective matters. Facts motivate. In 2018, Ohio received less than 1% of the $120 billion in VC raised in the US. 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts, gobbled 80%. That's crazy, not even close to where we need to be, but we can start closing that gap. Bob Johansson of the Institute for the Future joined me for a Cintrifuse webinar entitled Leading in a Vuca World. Vuca stands for volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity. He said the natural tendency, especially in crisis, is to move from the present forward, but he cautioned us that this can be a dangerous way to proceed. There's too much noise in the present to achieve clarity about anything other than what's right in front of us. A present-forward approach guarantees that we'll fail to see what's truly possible and consequently fail to make the necessary choices to get there. A better approach, look from the future back and then identify what's needed now. This provides us with context. It enables us to imagine a future that's better than the past. If we look from the future back, we can see 6 shifts that will profoundly affect the way we live and work. They're not new, but they're being dramatically accelerated. Number 1, hyperconnectivity. Digital infrastructure is lowering access barriers, accelerating the connection of everyone and everything. 2, contact-free experiences. Expect the Alexification of virtually everything as we move into a voice-driven, contact-free world. 3, health solutions at startup speed, more AI, more use of apps for early radar and diagnostics, more disease resilience thanks to sensors and feedback loops. Supply chain is a new center of gravity. Resilience, transparency, and responsible sourcing will be key priorities, demanding game-changing innovation. A greater sense of urgency around social justice and equity issues. We're reaching an important tipping point in our country. That's an opportunity. The hyper-fast evolution of the experiential economy. The convergence of these shifts will create an Uber shift that will influence daily life in ways that we're now just glimpsing. Experiential tech, from AR, VR to gamification, will transform everything. All of this represents a tremendous opportunity. People in major cities are questioning the cost and the health risks of incredibly dense populations. Startups and large companies alike are challenging whether it makes sense to stay on the coast. We know from our first ever official consumer electronics show presence in partnership with Ready and Jobs Ohio, there's real mystique about Cincinnati. What's critical is that we sell our benefits with confidence and excitement. We must leverage our advantages and compete together as one tightly integrated ecosystem and do so with unprecedented urgency. We need to pick up the pace of learning, hacking, and scaling, and making the case that there's no better community to launch and scale a startup and to create the innovations that will revitalize our community and improve people's lives. That's the future of our region if we make the most of the moment. And I look forward to the role we'll play to help ensure we do just that. What I wanted to do is give you a taste of, before we bring in our first honored speaker, Lieutenant Governor John Husted, I wanted to give you a taste of the startup culture we're building here and let the startup founders speak directly to you. Let's run the video.
I'm really proud and excited to have had the chance to work with so many startups and founders that have really demonstrated persistence and continued to make progress against the most challenging business climate ever.
At Foresight, we mine user-generated content, so things like reviews and social comments, for actionable insights for brands. Our biggest milestone in the face of a pandemic was hitting $1 million in revenue in September and doing it profitably.
We are an indoor farming company, a vertical farming company, growing the best, tastiest, healthiest, nutrition-rich produce right here in Cincinnati and Hamilton, Ohio. Middle of COVID, we were actually able to build what we call our 70K reference design farm, which is going to be the most phenomenal, automated, fully roboticized, commercial vertical farm. One of the first in the world.
And we make inertial motion sensing products all the way down to single chip solutions. And then we also have used that same technology for motion sensing, virtual reality, augmented reality.
We are trying to solve the lockdown that realtors, brokers, agents have on the residential real estate industry.
This industry is the #1 industry in the American economy. And yet the innovation and disruption is almost non-existent.
We're a SaaS provider of compliance technology and services to investment advisory firms. Many of these firms spend more time, money, and effort on compliance than they need to. We want to change that.
We are a group of local high schoolers, grades 9 through 12, trying to younger students in our community, grades K through 8. We offer tutoring, we offer just generic homework help, the program we call Big Sibling, where you just kind of hang out with the younger students and engage them for 45 minutes.
What we do is take three-dimensional data and we codify that in a way that software can understand. That allows us to save time for engineers by giving them the same kind of tools that software engineers would have. It saves a lot of money in procurement. It simplifies supply chains, and it allows you to actually identify what things are out in the field with a picture or a scan. Think of like IKEA instructions on steroids. We've been able to launch the site called fangs.com, and it's the world's first free geometric search engine, but it's also the world's first smart collaboration tool for 3D users and enthusiasts specifically. Added over 100,000 users and over 1 million models.
We're called Johnny Spot Concierge because we are always there for our clients, for our constituents, for our customers. The world, I came from GE, and they talked about analytics and predictive analytics, the ability to be able to always predict what someone is going to need whenever they need it.
My name is Tarek Kamel. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Circle. We take modern technologies such as AI and machine learning and apply them internally. So how can you modernize how we talk to, treat, and retain employees?
We are doing API-based commercial insurance. And so what we're doing is we are digitizing and attaching commercial insurance policies in the apps in the marketplaces that, in particular, small business owners are already using. Our technology can translate into multiple different marketers.
Hi, my name is Latasha Ward. Hi guys, I'm Ethan, and I am the CEO and Head of Organizational Change for Big Business and Individual Development. One of our big milestones was to help our clients streamline their process even through COVID. And we couldn't have done that without our great connections that we have within the Cincinnati area. There's so much growth and so much opportunity for entrepreneurs.
Tokenism is a platform for fractionalized real estate investments. And we're truly democratizing real estate utilizing blockchain and AI, where the next generation or anyone wanting to invest in any kind of real estate.
With Black Market Brand, we sought to restore, repair, and reverse the toxic effect of systemic discrimination. To simply put it, our goal was to encourage inclusivity within the beauty and personal care industry.
Hey Herbie is a startup where we are trying to keep older adults connected, safe, and happy in their own homes. This is our Hey Herbie device, so that they can watch their favorite TV shows, and they can stay connected with their friends and family through video chat. They get their reminders, medication reminders, physician reminders in the house.
Infotron is a marketing technology company
that helps some of the biggest brands in the world to become more data-driven.
All righty. Well, it is my privilege and honor to invite our first guest, Lieutenant Governor John Husted, who, as many of you know, has played a really critical role throughout the state. He's been a longtime champion of innovation, and of course, has played a really critical role in this time of crisis. I think we're just waiting for him to, okay, here he comes.
Here I am. Can you hear me, Pete?
And as obviously, Lieutenant Governor, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I can hear you fine. Enjoyed the presentation.
Trying to get on. The Lieutenant Governor spent quite a bit of time in Cincinnati. It was a big, last time I saw him, he played a really big role as part of the $100 million investment with Jobs Ohio, UC, and Children's. That was like a big announcement right before the crisis, and he spent a lot of time with our startup ecosystem, having various dialogues and engagement on a range of topics. Has been a big champion of bringing more of a concierge mindset to state government services. Can we bring better apps to the Ohio Bureau of Vehicles and the like? Here we go. Welcome aboard.
Can you hear me now? There we go.
We can hear you now. You look great.
All right, great.
Thanks so much for joining us. And thank you for all that you've done for our innovation economy, not just in southern Cincinnati, but southern Ohio, but throughout the state. And I wanted to ask you, you have been incredibly busy lately, and we see you and the governor on TV all the time. And a big theme that I feel emerges in your visits is around resilience. And I was just wondering, maybe to hear some high-level reactions from these stories that have really inspired you around the state as everyone's tried to manage through this crisis.
Right at the start, we did not have a supply chain for critical PPE and the like. We just didn't. And we worked quickly with the Manufacturers Association and Magnet to help develop that supply chain. That included literally, if you recall the problems we had with testing early on, we literally couldn't purchase the swabs that you needed to conduct the tests. We had a company in Ohio that helped produce those. Many of them furniture makers who went from making furniture to making gowns for hospitals. Obviously masks. We had distillers move from alcohol to hand sanitizer, although alcohol sales has been pretty robust during the pandemic. We had a lot of businesses in Ohio step up and do that. We hope, working with Jobs Ohio, to retain that. We really, as America, need to think about where we are with our supply chain and not relying on critical drugs and other types of PPE and the like from other countries. And so we hope to build that capacity in Ohio, maintain that capacity in Ohio, and make sure that we have customers for those businesses, so that they are ready to go, and if they need to ramp up, that we can have them. So that's just one example of the start. I will also say that, look, this Ohioans in general, we're very resilient. Look at education. I mean, look, we had to have schools that transitioned from at a moment's notice to going completely online. It exposed some of our weaknesses as a nation in the lack of access to high-speed internet for many people. You know, those are issues that I'm really focused on trying to remedy. But we also had, I think we'll learn from this experience that we can, going forward, use a lot more digital educational platforms to help improve the way we educate people.
Okay, we'll just give it one more minute, and if not, we'll go to the next section and we'll kind of come back. We'll think and act like a startup, and we'll problem solve around this. Yeah, so I think what we'll do is we'll, again, in a good spirit of agility, we will share a medley of perspective from our VC network on what they are seeing out there in the context of solutions that kind of come out of the post-outbreak era. So let's give it a go. And Lieutenant Governor, hang in there. We'll get you in here. We got a lot of important questions to ask you about the critical work that you're doing. So hang in there. Listen into this next video.
Most excited by the mainstream acceptance of meetings by Zoom and the fact that deals and sales can be closed remotely. I think this is going to change the game for startups. And any entrepreneur that can thrive in a contactless environment, we think they're going to be successful. And
Obviously, we've been spending a lot of time on work from home and remote work opportunities. We have a history of investing in them, and that's accelerated dramatically.
Most of the digital companies right now are actually thriving in the midst of this moment where traditional retail has been essentially shut down or paused. There's a big opportunity now for early stage entrepreneurship to attack sectors that might otherwise have been strong, but might now be a little bit back-footed.
I think what's exciting me most is seeing this sort of rapid acceleration of digital transformation in industries that historically have been incredibly slow to make that transition.
I'm an e-commerce guy, and the acceleration we've seen in the last couple of quarters has me incredibly excited. I mean, these are numbers nobody could have imagined, and they're driving incredible opportunities for technological innovation and everything from supply chain and logistics, demand forecasting and planning, merchandising, and more.
So one trend that is emerging and accelerating, especially in the wake of COVID, is telehealth. Healthcare is going digital. Telehealth make it easier, more affordable, more accessible. We've started a number of different telehealth companies, including one, Hims and Hers. The company has already facilitated over 2 million telehealth consultations across a number of specialties.
The obvious trends around remote working, but what's really interesting about that is really thinking about how this translates into the future, and just how, making people sort of more productive wherever they are, so that they have flexibility and the ability to really work from anywhere, and how to integrate teams both remotely and in person.
I think that there's more innovation that needs to happen, and the way to drive innovation is by having startups compete to figure out the best solution. And I think that still needs to happen more. Both consumers are maturing, as our financial institutions are changing, as questions about access to the financial world and financial institutions are changing.
We're seeing a broadening of the geography and a broadening of the top of the funnel. Given that everybody is at home or everybody is remote, instead of having to get in the car and drive to Milwaukee or to Madison or to Pittsburgh or Cincinnati or wherever it may be, we're able to more efficiently, more effectively talk to a broader swath of people across a broader geography and fill the top of the funnel faster, and then move people through to an investment decision more quickly as well.
A lot of businesses are simply focused on how to best service customers where they are. And right now that's in their homes.
We just did our first investment fully remote without meeting the team in person, in a company called Good by Gear, a leading marketplace in the baby and kids gear and re-commerce. People really care about sustainability, doing good.
Retail and telehealth 2030 has kind of accelerated to today. Regulations have been relaxed to enable people facing a wide variety of chronic conditions and other healthcare issues that need to be addressed, to have those addressed virtually via a doctor.
Must accelerate technologies that make our societies more resilient. In healthcare, it may mean ways of decentralizing healthcare and allowing patients to get both diagnoses and treatment at points of care. In food, it may mean automating the supply chain of critical and high demand goods like poultry. In textiles, it may mean biology.
Jobs can now be in a lot of different places. Previously, people within our networks moved to San Francisco, New York, Seattle, Boston, Chicago. They may not have to make those moves anymore.
Am I back? All righty. Okay. Like a startup, pivoting. Now let's see if we can bring back the Lieutenant Governor, and I'm going to give you open space to talk about any of your passion areas: IP promise, innovation, making the company, the state more app friendly. You have the floor, sir.
Sure. Well, we'll focus first of all on your question about the state's resiliency, what it had to do. Look, we weren't prepared. We had to build out a hospital system. Ohio doesn't have a hospital system; it has a bunch of hospitals. Rick Lofgren from UC heads up our southern zone. We had to build zones. We had to build a dashboard. We had to collect data. We had to analyze this data in a way that we weren't prepared for. So those are kinds of things that the state. The problem is, for government, a lot of it, our technologies are outdated. Some things are still on mainframe computers, like the unemployment compensation system. They're not in the cloud. One of the things that we've learned through this is that we have to make more. And if we want government to be better at customer service, which is part of why I Innovate Ohio, we have to have both the technology, make the technology investments in government, and we have to invest in the talent, because you can't do top-notch customer service kinds of things at high scale like government needs to, unless you have both. And that's something that we've transitioned to. We relied on the private sector in an emergency, but we have to do better as government as we look forward.
Lieutenant Governor, you've also been a big champion of leveraging our university infrastructure as a startup engine, IP promise. You're working very closely with our friend David Adams and others that are committed to really making Ohio kind of a magnet for talent. Can you comment on some of that work? Are you feeling good about progress? What still needs to be done?
Well, I would say a couple of things, and I'll try to make them Cincinnati focused. First of all, we created working with UC and other partners. David Adams, as you mentioned, Jason Heichenfeld, who was very, very helpful to us. And Jobs Ohio created the Innovation District, which we believe will be a catalyst for innovation, investment in those emerging technologies and medical advances, for example. We're going to help build the talent, working with our colleges and universities to build the IT, the tech talent that we need. And then the last piece, we have to work on is what Pete, you talk about a lot, which is the capital. Ohio and the community is putting a lot of capital in, but that's not good enough. We have to attract capital from other places around the globe and around the country. And we believe, though, that this innovation district can be a catalyst to do that. Elements of the innovation economy that we can do better at is the Ohio IP Promise, which UC was a big part of helping us create. For those of you, I've had a long time frustration that we got a lot of great innovations going on in Ohio, but they're not getting commercialized and they're not turning into businesses. And this was really a collaborative effort with all of our public universities and 2 private universities to create a streamlined, uniform, transparent process for doing that. And the reports, since we created it, the reports I've been getting back over the past year, we're 1 year into it, is that it's working. It's helping serve as a way to help people on campus, investors, others, really make that less friction oriented. Let's put it this way, a little easier for the commercialization of IP. We have to do better at this. We can't look outside of Ohio for people to solve our problems. We have to be our own solution. And I really believe, I feel really strongly that Cincinnati region has a great opportunity to be attractive to capital and innovation. You got universities, but I'm particularly fond of the 1819 Center at UC. I just think that that's the culture that we need to create throughout our cities in Ohio. And we're doing that. And these are just some of the elements that go into making that happen. But it's got to be, you got to have money, you got to have capital, you got to have talent, and you got to create a collaborative, innovative culture to be able to do these things.
Now, Lieutenant Governor, I wanted to close by giving you an opportunity, in startup spirit, kind of being opportunistic. We have, I think, over 60 representatives of the venture capital community on this call, most from outside of Ohio. And a lot of them are now, I think, for the first time, really thinking about not just starting companies here, but actually scaling up companies as you think about going from seed to Series A or Series B. What's your sales pitch to them about why Ohio is the place to grow their startup, to start or grow their startup?
Well, first of all, if you look at the venture capital companies that are here, the people that are doing, they're succeeding. This is happening in our state. We just need to increase it on a larger scale. You will be welcomed. Believe me, if you're a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, they're all over the place. In Ohio, we don't have as many. You'll find that people here are going to welcome you, help you, knock down barriers, and open doors for you. And they're going to want you to succeed. And those are 2 elements, really, I believe. But if you're going to be in the Midwest, there's no better state than Ohio. I mean, we have 3 great cities of substance, a lot of smaller cities of substance with a lot of innovation going on there across multiple sectors. You can't go to another state in the Midwest that has, more cities doing a variety of different things. Cincinnati's economy is different than Columbus's economy, which is different than Cleveland's economy. If you look at the Cincinnati marketplace, you got right up the road, the University of Dayton Research Center, the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, who is the research lab there is foremost in one of the foremost research labs in the world. You got that talent, you got that innovation that we exist, the diversity of our state, and a welcoming community. What more do you want? I mean, come on, you got to be in Ohio.
Long list of compelling reasons. Well, we are grateful that you spent time with us. We are appreciative of your leadership, and we know how difficult it's been. And I hope that all of us emerge, even stronger out of this really difficult period. And we hope to invite you back soon. You're always welcome here. But thank you very, very much.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next segment. We're going to talk about the the Cintrifuse Fund, and we have Sarah Anderson, who's many of you know is our kind of esteemed fund manager, who I'm still kind of freaking out about her, moving on to another opportunity. But we also have an esteemed entrepreneur, Allison, who many of you know was behind .loop, and he's doing some really exciting stuff that you've read about in the newspaper. And Austin, first off, thank you for joining us. We're absolutely thrilled. And tell us a little bit about what you're up to. I mean, I'm sure people were reading that article thinking, okay, what does it mean? I think it means more opportunity, more jobs. I know you're distributed, but what's going on?
Yeah, you bet. So let me just give a quick background on myself for the people on the call who I haven't had an opportunity to meet. I'm Austin Allison, and I'm a longtime Cincinnati there, went to the University of Cincinnati, undergrad and law. All my family's there. I still have a house in Cincinnati, so it's really great to be on this call.
You haven't.
I got my business career started with a company called .loop, which I founded in Cincinnati and built over a period of 6 or 7 years until we sold to Zillow in 2015, where I stayed on for 3 or 4 years before taking off and figuring out what I was required to go do next. So Picasso is my new thing. And to tell you a little bit about it, it's Picasso pronounced like the artist. And we're on a mission to empower more people to own and enjoy second homes. And the problem that we're solving is one that can really be described by underutilization. Most second homes sit vacant 10 to 11 months of the year. Meanwhile, there's tens of millions of households all over the world that aspire to own second homes, but are unable to due to reasons of cost or hassle. And we're going to solve that problem through co-ownership. So to Pete, to talk a little bit about the company and how we view Cincinnati as part of our strategy and narrative. So I co-founded the business with Spencer Raskoff, who was co-founder and longtime CEO of Zillow, as well as we've got about 25 other people on our founding team, about 20 of which were part of Spencer or my team at Zillow and .loop. So it's a really fantastic team, and we're building the company. Even pre-COVID, our plan was to build this company in a distributed way, where we actually never planned to have a headquarter office location, but instead we're going to selectively choose to spin up satellite offices in places where we believe the business can have critical mass of really talented people. And Cincinnati is the first of those locations. So we have people right now. I live primarily in Napa Valley, although I still spend time in Cincinnati at home there as well. So several of us are here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have people in Seattle, Austin, Texas, Arizona, but most of our people are actually in Cincinnati at the moment. And Cincinnati is going to be our first satellite office location. So we're incredibly excited to have Cincinnati as part of our story, and really appreciative of the opportunity.
And Sarah, our fund network has been involved in this. Is it Mavron? Is it right? Okay.
Yeah. And Austin, maybe you can talk a little bit about the relationship you have with Mavron. So Mavron is a GP in our fund too for Cintrifuse, a new relationship for us. And I know you were stealth with them for a little while you were planning this.
Yeah, we were. So we raised a $17 million seed round quietly back in February, and Mavron led that round. We've also since secured about $250 million in debt, which empowers us to convert whole homes into Picassos, which are the co-ownership structure that facilitates this product. But yeah, Mavron's fantastic. They're a really innovative, big thinking, long-term oriented firm based in Seattle. It was co-founded by Dan Levitan and Howard Schultz, both of who I consider, great friends and mentors at this point. And they've been incredibly helpful to Picasso. So it's really great to see the connection between Mavron and Cincinnati. And they've been fantastic.
Outstanding. Any kind of I can't resist asking you, just got any advice for entrepreneurs here in Cincinnati? I mean, I think you're kind of the model that we want to, and we want a lot more of you. Just any advice? We got a lot of entrepreneurs on the line. We obviously got a lot of VCs as well, but
Yeah, you bet. So I'll rattle off a few things that come top of mind. The first is that this is really hard. It's really hard to solve a big problem from scratch. It takes persistence and perseverance, and you just have to hang in there. Piece of advice in terms of what I've found to be really critical in building great businesses. First and foremost is you have to be surrounded by great people. Nobody succeeds alone. I still to this day, I haven't seen a story where somebody succeeded alone in a venture like this. It's always about the amazing team behind the entrepreneur. So I can say that was absolutely true of Dotloop. That's certainly true of Picasso. So that's most important. I mean, think about who you're surrounding yourself with, and it's everyone from your team members to your investors to your mentors and advisors. Following a mission, because this work is so difficult. Unless you're absolutely in love with what you're doing and absolutely about the problem that you're solving, it's really hard to wake up every morning to be energized. But when you're passionate about what you're doing, you wake up every morning, just ready to take on the world and ready to go solve this problem. So create businesses to solve problems that you're passionate about. Don't create a business just because you want to be an entrepreneur. And in fact, I stayed on at Zillow for 4 years, which many people, questioned why I did that. A lot of entrepreneurs will kind of move on to their next thing right away. And there were two main reasons why I did that. One is I really respected the team, and I thought that I could learn a lot from Zillow and the people that ran that business, which proved to be true. And then the second thing was, I didn't have that idea that was like burning in my heart. And it wasn't until this Picasso idea really became pronounced in my heart as a problem that I wanted to go solve that I decided it was time to kind of turn the page to the next chapter. So those would be the top two pieces of advice.
Well, Allison, Austin, we're so honored that you joined us. I know you've got a flight to catch, but we're super excited about what you're doing. I also love the fact that, I feel like we've got this crop of second-time founders, third-time founders, Bob Gilbreth, Rod Robinson. It's a growing pool. We know that's going to make a big difference because you know how hard it is. You know the machinations of raising money. I've been there too. It's definitely not as easy as it sounds. But thanks for your support.
Right.
Thank you for championing Cincinnati. Definitely, we hope the math tilts towards Cincinnati on jobs and the percentage of that $17 million that's here. But thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all for the opportunity.
So
Take
Sarah,
care.
you're not
Thanks,
off the hook
Austin.
yet. So Sarah, you've been, boy, I don't even know where to begin. You, I think the last time we checked in with you at the AGM, you had just raised the second fund, I think $56 million, brought in some new investors like AAA and Smuckers and quite a few individual investor, which I think is a really good KPI for us in terms of overall engagement. But just how are we doing on the fund? What's new? What are your tweetable tweets?
Yeah, I can't believe that was just a year ago that we closed Fund 2. It does feels like a lot longer than that. I mean, the whole world is new at this point. A lot has changed. I would say, with the fund, both Fund 1 and Fund 2, the venture asset class has just been surprisingly resilient going into this environment, specifically March and April. I mean, it was very Chicken Little-esque, right? The sky is falling. And I think the venture asset class has just shown its resiliency. In fact, in Fund 1 in Q2, we saw record exits, a huge surge in exits, including Muir's exit to Lululemon, Fleet Smith exiting to Apple, Giphy exited to Facebook. I mean, it kind of just went on, and that doesn't even include the bio sector, which has been an incredible category for us. In fact, just last week, we had another big announcement of a bio exit in Fund 1. And all of this was completely unexpected, right? If you would have joined some of our LP calls around the quarantine, this would not have been the And, I would say Fund 2 as well has realized significant tailwinds, right? With the valuation resets that have been going on in the market. We've seen increasing deal flow. On the corporate innovation side as well, we've had to really transition some of our own efforts around corporate innovation. And alongside a lot of our big cos, we've had to move into this virtual world that none of us were very accustomed to. But there have been significant benefits, I would say, around the innovation standpoint to moving into a virtual environment. So you mentioned in your opening comments, the first ever virtual venture teardown that we did this year. That was a new product we had not done before. And typically a venture teardown is a very intense kind of 48-hour period of, a specific big co-problem and working with VCs, working with specific startups to kind of solve that problem. And we've historically focused on one geography. And in this virtual environment, we can pull VCs and talent from all over the world to kind of join us in helping solve some of these challenges. So that's been a huge benefit to us. And that's one of the benefits of the model, right? Is the network that we build among VCs and global VCs, really. I will say too, one of the things that we've been focusing on over the past, we have a strong history in the venture studio space. Like Atlas was one of our first investments in Fund 1, and company creation is exactly what they do, and they do it very well. But we have been doubling down in that venture studio space in Fund 2. And what it does is it creates a co-creation and co-design capability for our big cos around specific problems. A lot of these venture studios bring a very deep bench of talent to the table that we can utilize for the benefit of our big cos. So I think also we're going to be hearing from Carmichael, which has been very exciting, material impact on the sustainability and supply chain space that a lot of our LPs and big cos have been grappling with significantly over the past 12 months. So, and especially over the past 6 months. So I'm excited for you guys to hear from him.
And again, the funds have, contrary to what we initially expected, hasn't been as bad as we feared with COVID and all the market volatility.
Yeah, I would say we're definitely not out of the woods yet. There's a lot that the shoe can still drop. And as an LP, an investor in these funds, we're always cognizant of, what is the downside risk? But we are really fortunate to be in that venture asset class, which has been incredibly persistent and resilient. And the sentiment has changed remarkably just in the past 2 to 3 months to a sentiment among VCs that, we're through this. We are persistent. A lot of VCs that may have impaired their portfolios early on are actually seeing a recalibration now of their revenues in the underlying portfolio companies, right? Getting back to or above where they thought they were going to be for 2020. So it is an incredible story. And I think one of the things you heard from that venture kind of highlight reel was they are looking for entrepreneurs that have grit, that have flexibility, and like Austin mentioned, that have a mission orientation and can drive talent. So it has been surprisingly advantageous, I think, even with a lot of the unfortunate circumstances in the current environment, the portfolios and venture has been surprisingly resilient. And hopefully, fingers crossed, it stays that way. But again, we're not out of the woods. And I think I want to add to that, just we've seen in Cincinnati also a big surge in fundraising rounds that have been completed even during the pandemic, right? Which has been surprising. I think we saw a round completed from Vendley. We saw, like you mentioned, a round completed from Coterie. Picasso, we just saw their round completed. And so we're continuing to see a lot of this just persistence. Entrepreneurs are brilliant at pivoting and figuring out how to manage through different challenges. And so
Sarah,
we're seeing a lot of that right now.
I'd be remiss not to double click on a point I made earlier in my talk, just to express my and our community's gratitude for your 8 years of service to Cintrifuse. You've laid an incredible foundation. You've accomplished probably the hardest piece, which is delivering great returns, which I think you got to do just to kind of keep people in the game. And then that keeps the door open for all the other important things that we want to do. But we're deeply indebted to you. We're in the process of looking to fill your very, very big shoes, and we actually have a spec out, and that process will will go on for some time. And I'm also kind of using this as free advertisement to let people know that I think that Sarah would agree that this is an exceptional opportunity. It's not only a chance to drive great returns, but to really have a big impact. And we are looking to, I get the question all the time, well, what about Fund 3? And we're clearly going to build on Sarah and Cintrifuse 1 and 2, foundation. We're going to preserve the syndicate model. We still believe there's a ton of potential there. We do think we might be able to get more return on network in this new world. We're also thinking hard, and I don't have all the specifics, but how we might blend it with some more direct investment. We've done a little bit of direct investment in the past, but the thinking is that maybe 25% or so would be direct, and potentially in partnership, ideally in partnership with other VCs that are leading deals. So that could be a Cincy Tech, it could be Refinery, it could be a Lightship, it could be Naria. But the idea is that how can we better use our network and all the companies that back us up to really provide even more focus. The other thing is that we would try to anchor this new fund a bit more to strategic pillars or focus areas. One area that I'm really excited about and bullish, including for the fundraising circuit, is around sustainability, massive amounts of money there. And then a lot around customer experience, which relates to everything we've been doing around fintech, just reinventing the new service interface. And I've always believed that Cintrifuse could be a leader there. We're also, and this relates to the next panel that we're going to have, is looking to be much more intentional and deliberate, more action, less talk around minority and female entrepreneurship. So how can we use our fund instrument, our influence, our network to drive positive outcomes on that front? So you'll be hearing more about the strategy, lots to be worked. My boss is on the call, so I don't want to make it sound like we've got it all figured out, but it will happen, and we're very excited. And because you laid the great foundation, Sarah, we're in a much better position for success. So I thank you for your time. Congratulations on a great year. Thanks for bringing Austin in. I think that really validates the magic of Cintrifuse, and of course, more to come. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So with that, we're going to transition to a segment I'm really, really excited about, and I'm super, super grateful that both Brian and Candice Brackeen have agreed to join us. Ever since I've been here, Candice has been a huge inspiration to me. I love what she has built in our community. I'm a bit awed by, every time I blink, I feel like there's another, incredible achievement. And since I've gotten to know Brian, the two are just a tech dynamic duo, and have not only brought us, and I feel so lucky that here Cincinnati has kind of benefited from one of the largest, or the largest, African-American owned VC firm. And Brian in particular has become a real spokesperson for the Midwest. I think you're on the Endeavor board in Louisville, and Candice, I can't even rattle off all the things that you're associated with, but tell us about what's going on. Let's keep it very high level. I've got a bunch of questions, but I think you're doing some of the most exciting work in venture today. I know it's an inspiration to many others. I hope we can do a lot more with you moving ahead, but what's going on? Why Cincinnati? Why the Midwest? Why Lightship? Who wants to start?
Oh my goodness. So, I guess the story of is a little bit helpful. So a few years ago, I realized, and I've got these words now, and I don't think I had the words to explain it 4 years ago, but what I discovered was there was a market failure here in Cincinnati and nationally. And the market was failing minority entrepreneurs and minority general partners at funds. And there were plenty of people who weren't getting investment all over the country. If you think about research that's been done kind of all over the place, and maybe most specifically like Brookings Institute, in 1980, 80% of the US population identified as white American. In 2000, it was 70%. This year, it's about 60%, right? And so if we weren't servicing all of these people then, and we're not doing it now, we have a failure in the market. And so back in 2017, I set out to kind of fix this failure specifically in Cincy. And why Cincinnati and why Ohio? Gosh, couldn't do this anywhere else, right? We've got the Minority Business Accelerator, Mortar, and then us kind of all in the same city attacking this issue from multiple angles. And I think that that's why this is working right now. So we're expanding the accelerator into other cities. So we'll not only run it here, but we'll run it in Detroit as well, starting next year, and take some of the other programming into Tulsa, Oklahoma. And as everybody knows, we set out to raise a $20 million fund at the end of last year, and we've overshot our goal by quite a bit. And so we have a line of sight to a $50 million close in the next quarter or two.
Fantastic. And tell me about, Brian, maybe you can jump in and tell us about the investment thesis. I mean, I've read it. It's pretty darn exciting. It has implications, well beyond minority entrepreneurs. I think it could actually galvanize a whole different way of thinking about the untapped potential of the Midwest. But tell me more about the thesis.
Yeah, and it was a thesis created in the building you're sitting in.
Yeah,
2 floors down,
I remember those
right?
meetings.
Yeah, this is it's an Ohio story, it's a Cincinnati story, but it's even a Union Hall story. It's a Vine Street story.
Thank you.
It's hyper local, and we're really proud of that. And so we invest kind of in multiple levels. One, geography. So as we were talking about, the Midwest is underserved. It is the cheapest place to build a company to exit, and it has the highest average median exit value. So basically, you pay less to build it, you make more money when you sell it. So that's, if you to build a company anywhere in the country and put a dollar anywhere in the map, it should theoretically be in the Midwest, because every dollar you invest, you get $5.17 back at exit, if you get to exit, of course. So that alone is thesis worthy. I mean, you could literally stop there, right? And so, but then you come down a level, and we focus on women and underrepresented minorities. So this is women of any color, ethnic minorities, and also LGBT and the disabled. So these are folks that don't get their fair share of venture capital. 0.2% of all venture capital goes to a Black woman. Less than 3% goes to a woman at all. So think of all the folks.
You say 0.2?
0.2% of all venture capital goes to a Black woman. So when you are investing in a Black woman in VC, she is the rock star of rock star of rock star of rock stars, right? She's in the top 0.2% of all of her cohort. So that also, we talked a little bit in the last bit about grit and how important that is, right? And who has more grit than someone who is in that 0.2%, right? And then if you come down to the lowest level, we knew it was important to really focus. And what do we do well in the Midwest? And so that we can have the right kind of exit partners, the right university partners. Lieutenant Governor Vuca talked about the whole ecosystem in Ohio, right? And so what can we do to support that ecosystem? And so we invest in CPG. Obviously, nobody in no city is better in the world at CPG than Cincinnati, Ohio, period. You can argue me all day. I don't want to. But also artificial intelligence, sustainability, which you spoke about a little bit earlier, right? E-commerce and healthcare. So think about e-commerce and Amazon's hub going in and all the things we're doing, distribution and supply chains in the Midwest, and particularly in our region. It just feels like a slam dunk.
I'd also like either or both of you to comment on kind of the collisions going on different initiatives. Because what's inspiring me of late is, I mean, first off, there's a part of what you're doing that's almost like it's an integrated value chain. And you've created training programs, you had Hillman, and I'm sure you're getting a lot of, focus lectures. But what's unique is that you have kind of an integrated value chain. And then we've also got some really impressive initiatives at the chamber level. I mean, they're talking about building really big funds. Darren Ellis, I just had lunch with Molly North, and I was really struck at how committed. I mean, it is not a check the box. It is a strategic plank. I mean, is there something really, really big that could emerge? I mean, in 5 years, could folks look at Cincinnati the way you might look at, Atlanta or Detroit in terms of, Black entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I'll start there. So, I mean, Detroit asked us to come to Detroit, right? So I think that while they are really good at telling their stories out loud, they're not necessarily great at executing on the things that they want to do. And again, Atlanta is doing very well. I will take nothing away from them at all. But, Cincinnati, we're ahead just because of the partnerships that we've built. Hillman was started by dollars that were combined from Cintrifuse, the Brandery, Cincy Tech, HTDC, in collaboration with Ohio Third Frontier. There is not another city that's happening in. And so if we can double down on investing in women, investing in minorities, we win. It's already proven that women-led companies have a 35% higher rate of return, and that they make 12% more in revenue. If we just double down on women, we're doing great. And then if we add in minorities and talk about having a diverse team, we know that diverse teams do better overall at the board level, at the leadership level, and at a team level as well. So I think that if we continue with our focus and work together collaboratively as partners, that's how we win and we become a model city.
It's interesting. My big takeaway at Nestle, working globally for 8 years, is that diversity and innovation share a symbiotic relationship. It is the magic. And it doesn't really kind of hit you in the head until you are, you're only, I think there's only like 3% of the population was American in the global headquarters. And so you just think differently. Now, Brian, can you tell me about some of the portfolio companies you've got some real investments underway? I think at least one of them has already got some important follow-on or partnered investment from others like Undock. But can you give us a flavor for some of the investments? We may have some folks on the call want to listen to them or invest. I don't know.
Yes, we need more co-investors. Is always a good thing. But a good example would be Fresh Fry. It was our first investment. Jeremiah is a chemist in Louisville, Kentucky. And when he was a kid, his mother would actually put a potato in fish grease to filter it and clean it up. And he got obsessed with this as a child. God knows why. Must have been a kind of boring kid. Grows up, becomes a chemist, and creates an organic pod, kind of like a Tide Pod, that you throw into commercial cooking oil at the end of the day in a restaurant, and it filters the oil. And then just the next morning, just throw it out. It's safer, extends the life of the oil between 33 and kind of 40%. Really powerful tool. Before we invested, they were already in 3,500 plus restaurants. Small team and did good revenue, 3 people. They were absolutely crushing it.
They got a great base.
So we invested, and then they were looking for an R&D lab. We were able to get them space in Cincinnati, and so now we're kind of moving some of these good jobs, these good R&D jobs, into the state through our investment.
Outstanding. How about Undock?
Undock's great, predictive scheduling. So if you're a guy like Pete Blackshaw, people want to talk to you all the time. And it's hard to keep your schedule all together, which is probably why he likes this company.
Impossible.
So Undock allows you to, on the email out, it'll know what the schedule is for both parties, and it'll pick a time that's perfect for everybody. So you're just confirming the time. Everything else is already done for you. And then when it is time, you just click a link, and then it enters you into the meeting. So it's a mixture of like Calendly and Zoom. They had a baby, right? Because they believe a meeting is actually everything from the scheduling to the meeting itself, all in one package. And so, well, we led that round into Undock, but we had Bessemer Venture Partners, Lair Hippo, Alumni Ventures, Backstage Capital, others follow on. So really, really impressive. And we're moving them from New York to the Midwest as well.
That's exciting. And tell us about your team. I mean, you must be hiring. I'm sure you got a lot of folks that want to be part of your movement. I certainly do. But how's the team building going?
Oh my goodness, there are 9 of us now on two organizations. So some at the nonprofit and some at the for-profit. So yeah, there are 9 of us plus 2 additional contractors, so 11 in total. And we've got a director of technology that helps us to run Twitch Pitch, as well as going and helping them to hire technical team and staff. We've just helped place a few new CTOs and machine learning, one of the organizations. So That's been helpful. We've always had the amazing Alexis Alston, who is now a senior associate with us. She leads deal flow and diligence with a lot of our teams. We have a director of communications to tell this story that's been going on for years.
Yeah.
We've got an amazing social media lead that came to us from that Ohio Third Frontier diversity program for interns. So she's been with us since 2018. She went and launched her own company, so we use her as a consultant here for our social. So yeah, that's just a little bit of flavor for the folks we have right now. And we've got a few project managers around the country that run some of the major projects as we expand.
And one of the things I've really come to admire about both of you is that, I see you almost every night in social media across the platforms. You're really connected. You kind of use the platforms as focus groups, part amplifiers, but I feel like there's a lot of R&D going on. And I was really struck because I hadn't seen this with other VCs, or you leverage the Twitch platform for crowdsourcing ideas and engaging entrepreneurs. You got to share a little bit more about that. This was, I was at a Procter & Gamble event where, Twitch was kind of fun and games, but you kind of used it as part of the entrepreneurial process. Tell more.
Yeah, well, we think you can use these tools to get answers. The crowd is so smart. The crowd has so many resources. The crowd knows more than we do. And so why not put what you're working on out to the crowd to get an answer? We support a toy company. I'll let Candace talk about it, but we were trying to figure out some different ideas around financing. So we just said to the world, like, hey, who are the best investors in toys, right? And we got some really good answers back that we could then share with the company. So yeah, there's endless value in doing that. I think investors try to sometimes pretend like they have all the answers and don't want to kind of show that they don't, right? And so we're happy to say, we don't know this one, someone help us.
Yeah, and back in March when the world shut down, I said to the team, we've got to figure out a way to continue to engage with the folks, with our entire community. So let's figure out a way to do an online pitch competition. And I wanted to continue, just have it perpetually going. And so they came up with the idea and the name Twitch Pitch, which is on Tuesday and Thursday nights on Twitch. We did 3 seasons this year and had great sponsors, AARP, Amazon Web Services, and others. Actually, Ohio Third Frontier as well. So we saw 36 companies go through the program. 2 of the companies we've invested in now. We see about 6,000 viewers every week, which is incredible, since we kind of just came up with this idea on the fly. And for us, we're meeting investment-ready companies. We're asking them the question, would you be willing to move to the Midwest? And many are like, yes, I'd totally be willing to do that. So next year, we have a great sponsor. So Chase Bank is sponsoring the next 5 seasons of Twitch Pitch. And so we'll do, 5 seasons, new prize, so $25,000 per season, with a grand prize winner at the end of the year of $100,000. So we're super excited to just continue to highlight the work that we're doing here. And we're leveraging a super easy platform. So we're the first pitch competition, first VCs right on Twitch, just sitting there all day.
and the last question, and I hope the corporates that are on the call, don't make them squirm, but I think this is, I'd like you to comment on do you feel like the corporates are making headway in this area? I'm going to share a video in a moment of Mark Pritchard and some of his commentary on this, but we just saw yesterday from Kroger I thought a pretty impressive document by the numbers around diversity and commitment. They've talked about investing $3 billion in minority female-led entrepreneurs, but are you encouraged by the progress? I know this is no perfect answer here, but you have a forum.
Yeah, I'll start. Maybe Brian can add on. So it's been a difficult path when you don't feel like you're being listened to. And we are at a moment in history where suddenly our voices are being heard. And so a few months ago, lots of corporations immediately said, hey, we're going to do something about this. And there was a fear that what they were doing was hollow. Others decided to hold back and not say anything immediately while they built. What I think has been happening is even when that commitment came early and it was hollow, like just a shell, those companies that went on and built something amazing internally. So SoftBank immediately came out and said, hey, we're doing this. But at the time, it was just a shell of an idea. And they've spent the last several months really building it out. And I think in the last few months, they've invested in 22 Black-led companies. We've got others, like you just mentioned, Kroger, took a little bit longer to get there. But now suddenly I'm hearing from folks on their team before this announcement even came out and said, hey, Candace, this is what we have now. And let's get going. So I'm encouraged by the progress, and I'm encouraged now that internal teams are now driving these things forward, right? Because really, each of these corporations is really just the sum of people that are there growing it.
Well, Brian and go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I'll just say really quickly, and this is for all of us, for Cincinnati, for Ohio, for the region, we have an opportunity in the next 12 to 18 months to make this place the center of underrepresented entrepreneurship. It could really happen. It's up for grabs, but it's going to take all of us. So reach out. Don't assume someone else is doing it. Don't, okay, hopefully GCF is going to do, I'll give there. And then, no, like call Candace, call Brian, like do it yourself. Because if you don't lean in like Pete has in Cintrifuse, we're proud to say that they're investors in our fund. Like if you don't reach out and you don't actually take active action, we have a lot of startups that need to work with corporates, but we don't always have the right access to those corporates. And so, yeah, please, we're available all day on Twitter. Like Pete will tell you, we're available. You can email us. There's an info button on our website. Reach out. Let's work together.
Well, Brian and Candace, I have told my board, everyone, like the only KPI that really matters is, are we bringing risk capital, venture capital to our region? And what you are doing hits that KPI so squarely. So I am grateful for your leadership. You're, leading complicated issues, loaded with tension, but they are essential and they are timely. And we are grateful that you joined us, and we hope to have many, many more conversations. And yes, we will do everything we can to facilitate the good connections that are needed with the very promising startups that you're empowering and supporting. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And related to this, I wanted to, we were talking about corporates and commitments, and I was really pleased that, as you know, Procter & Gamble is based here, and they're not just a big company in Cincinnati. They are the world's biggest marketer. They are the world's biggest media spenders. And we're going to talk a lot about supply chain. But Mark Pritchard, the CMO, generously shared some views about our ecosystem, the potential of Ohio, and importantly, the very topic that we just talked about. Let's run this video.
One of the things that we do in P&G is we are constantly seeing around corners so we can invent tomorrow. And the way we invent tomorrow is to constructively disrupt brand building. So we're reinventing it. And we have been working with tech startups to do that. We already have access to more than 300,000 tech-driven startups. And we want to make sure that we continue to do so. Tech-driven startups are really what bring us great innovation. And we're really looking for you all to help us figure out how we can work together to be able to reinvent not only brand building, but the entire consumer experience. P&G and the companies we work with are really focusing on driving equality and inclusion in our what we call the creative and media supply chain. We want to make sure that we have 50-50 representation of gender, as well as 40% representation of multicultural in our advertisers, in our agencies, and in the media companies and production companies that we work with. The second thing we're doing is we're stepping up to make sure that we invest. We invest in Black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific American, and Native American owned companies and suppliers, because that is what's going to be able to drive not only better diversity, better innovation, and better economic equality. My message to VCs and founders outside of the region is to take a harder look at the greater Cincinnati area. P&G and many others are committed to building a thriving startup economy here in Cincinnati. We're already invested in the Cincinnati Restart efforts, particularly in the areas of supply chain, sustainability, and new commerce. This is a great environment It's a great environment not only to live and work, but it's a great environment for VCs, tech companies, and startups. So a lot of them are taking a fresh look at the economic and lifestyle advantages of being in a can-do Midwest city like Cincinnati. It's also got great access to innovators and thinkers and people who really, really want to take their game to the next level. So I would really encourage you to take a hard look at Cincinnati because it is a great place to live, work, and be a startup for innovation.
I think that's a really important message, and especially the diversity piece. I think sometimes people think of that as, boy, we're checking off a box, but there's really a product market fit here, and I think Procter has been, leading the charge and underscoring that this is central to business, this is central to innovation. I think we saw that in the Kroger report yesterday, and I do believe that what Brian and Candace were suggesting, that we have this golden opportunity to be a hub. I've always talked about the importance of strategic pillars, areas of focus where we have a right to win. And wouldn't it be special if 5 years from now we went back and said, this is, we are the hub for, Black African-American entrepreneurs. I think that's within our grasp. So thank you to everybody who's supporting that important effort. And we're going to continue that conversation. So we're going to move on to our next segment. I'm super excited about this because this is something that has been, probably my number one focus area for the year. We've got an absolutely kind of a stellar group. Is Leo with us too? Yeah, okay, great. Let's see if we can get Leo on as well. I've got Tisha Livingston, who's the CEO of Infinite Acres, and they are doing, you saw her counterpart in that startup video earlier, Mike Zelkheim, but they are doing amazing work in kind of sustainable supply chains, vertical farming. Carmichael Roberts is principal founder of Material Impact based in Boston, one of our more recent investments. And Leo Del Malloy is from EY, one of our most important partners. I can't thank them enough for what they do for our ecosystem. And Leo has been my partner in crime on a task force that Cintrifuse is chairing entitled Future of Supply Chain and New Commerce. And that's a pretty broad tent, but it is grounded in this belief that supply chains are kind of the center of resilience. They are innovation in that space is accelerating in the wake of the outbreak, and a lot of sustainable solutions are part of that formula. And so we're going to have a conversation about this particular topic. And do we have Leo yet? Oh, Leo's getting on. Okay, great. Well, let me kind of start with Tisha. Do you want to just give a little bit of a background on what you're doing with kind of 80 acres and the role that you played on this committee?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the opportunity to co-found and lead two startups in Cincinnati right now. One is 80 Acres Farms, and we're an indoor farming company providing fresh local produce to the region. It is our goal to be able to bring health and nutrition back to fresh produce. And then I'm also the CEO of Infinite Acres, which is a technology company that specializes in bringing technology for indoor farming all over the world. So we're building our first reference design farm with 80 acres in Hamilton. And that is the model for us to be able to take to all of our partners and pipeline projects around the world. With our project here with supply chain, it's called Food from Seed to Plate. And I have a team that's really exploring the ideas of post-COVID, what we need to do to be able to make sure that we can provide the consumer fresh local produce on shelf all the time. And being able to have that radical transparency, eliminating food waste, and ensuring that the healthiest produce can be here in Cincinnati.
Outstanding. And then Carmichael, a little bit about yourself and how your work touches this topic.
Yeah, definitely. So I think just like Tisha, I'm going to describe two hats that I have on. So primarily for Material Impact, we have two funds, a little over $300 million under management, all focused on early stage startups, inception based companies. and everything we focus on are manufactured products, where a lot of material science is on it. So I spend a lot of my time actually finding people, talented people like Tisha. We talk about it, where we help them build companies. And I should say, geographically, when you talk about manufacturing, and I've been listening all day, earlier today, Pete, on what you're describing, Cincinnati is like perfectly positioned from small company to large companies, entrepreneurs, and hopefully investors as well. I see welcome to Leo here, who's popped up. And then on the second, just to mention, because I think it could be helpful to know, I'm on an investment committee for a large climate-focused fund, which encompasses things like agriculture and food, and things that are really centered on supply chain related things. And that's a firm called Breakthrough Energy. That's $1 billion fund, and it's a 2-person investment committee. So, with those two hats, this topic is squarely centered for me.
Outstanding. And then Leo, welcome aboard. Delighted to have you. Hey, Leo, you've been, I described you as a partner in crime on the supply chain committee, but could you maybe kind of paint a picture of what we're trying to do? Because we are, I'd say our core hypothesis, some of this was galvanized by Amazon coming to CBG, which effectively makes us the #1 e-commerce distribution hub in the country, but we know we've already got incumbent strength in supply chains. But help the audience understand what we're trying to accomplish through these 3 committees: Tech Future of Freight, Food from Seed to Plate, and Circular Economy Zero Waste.
No, thanks, Pete. Thank you, and hello to everybody. I think we started off this journey with an ask, and the ask really was, close your eyes and imagine of where we believe the future of supply chain will be in 2025 or 2030. And all of us in the room, there must have been over a dozen of us, have individual experiences, separate companies, separate interfaces with individuals. And we came up with a laundry list of things that, where we saw each of our industries and our companies being in 2025 and 2030. And I think we took that and we said, okay, what are the common themes? And as Pete alluded to, and we've heard some of the messaging already today, is we heard sustainability being a key theme. We also heard customer experience being a huge theme across all the different areas that Pete alluded to. So we took those themes and kind of said, okay, based on those themes and based on the input that we have, what are those journeys that we want to take on? What are those aspects that we want to double click on and see where startup companies and funds as well as big companies can really energize and put their thoughts around? And as Pete mentioned, from seed to plate, which I know Tisha will talk about in great detail, zero waste, circular economy, and the future of freight, really there were just mind-blowing examples of where we think these industries can go. And I think all in all, we have an unstoppable momentum right now in this particular area, in supply chain, in this region, to really capitalize on the fact that we've got great companies and great people and great startup companies backing, the future of supply chain. So more to come on all these initiatives that we're developing and that we're leveraging. But I think there's a tremendous amount of energy. And, Brian mentioned in our earlier session, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. I would even say there's an obligation that we have as a region to really double click and kind of fast forward some of these ideas so we can really make an impact within our overall region.
Now, Tisha, it's really easy to hear the term 80 acres farms or infinite acres and think you're just going to stumble into a crop of broccoli. But in fact, you are a technology company and you are on the bleeding edge. You're licensing your technology. You did a deal with Ocado and Prima in Europe. How much potential is there? I mean, if we say that we want to be the leading ag tech sector in the Midwest or in the United States, how big an opportunity is that for us?
Well, it's a global opportunity. And when you think about, we have the problem in US, we have the problem globally. People need food security. And there's governments, there's investment funds, there's There's growers that are wanting to figure out how to provide fresh, healthy produce to their constituents. And they need the technology and the technology development, which is what Infinite Acres provides. We have the state-of-the-art technology with Ocado Priva and 80 Acres, bringing together the capability with the right unit economics to be able to change the way the world eats. 80 Acres is the best operator of these systems, guaranteeing yield, guaranteeing the right price, making sure that we can have affordable produce all over the place. And I have to tell you, I was on a call in the Middle East this morning. We talked to Europe. We have projects in Africa. I have a project in China that'll be finished early next year. The world is demanding this technology. We are certainly leading in on this technology, and we're doing it right here in Hamilton, Ohio, the greater Cincinnati area. So I'm sure that many people don't realize that we are putting the first in the world fully automated reference design farm that we intend to scale all over the world. And there's plenty of work where we need help innovating in the gaps, because this is a new industry. So we're just figuring it out now. We have a great product, but there's plenty of work that needs to be done. And we need more resources. We need more startups here in Cincinnati to be able to help support us.
Carmichael, jump in. How big is this space that's just sustainable supply chains? I know one of your portfolio companies is trying to figure out synthetic palm oil, which I wish we figured out while I was at Nestle. But how big a space is this? I mean, are we right to think about this as a growth sector?
Pete, it's as big as it gets. It's just like Tisha said. I mean, when you talk about big, it would almost be silly for me to describe the numbers. The way I would say, every manufacturing-based company that's looking at making any kind of a product has inputs into that product, and sustainability is the critical core component in that. And it's not just we all care about the environment, and we hopefully all care about the future and the climate. But even beyond that, as we look deeper, it's just a tremendous opportunity for innovation to build better products that literally pound for pound are better products, in addition to meeting the sustainability requirements. And so when you look at all the components in supply chain, sometimes you're not making an end product, sometimes you're making an input. It could be anything ranging from a robotic company to, like you mentioned, a key thing like ingredient like palm oil. What I'm seeing now, which is a great sign, are entrepreneurs. If you talked to me about 5 years ago, entrepreneurs were still leaning towards traditional tech. Things that are not about keeping the world healthy, fed, safe, warm, secure, and powered, because they were faster companies to build it. They thought they could build big companies. Those very same entrepreneurs call me routinely every week and tell me, I just sold my company, and the next thing I want to work on falls, smack dab into sustainability. And that's a great sign.
Leo, is there anything, I know we're not supposed to divulge our recos, but is there any, can you give us a teaser? Is there anything in there that you're kind of particularly excited about? Obviously Tisha's space, but anything else that you can,
Well, I won't steal any of Tisha's thunder, but I will say that I think the ideas that are coming out of these groups and how we're the future of freight, just challenging ourselves to think differently. Think about Uber. How Uber transports people. How can Uber transport goods? And maybe it's not Uber, maybe it's something else. How do you handle that last mile? Is that a problem that's been trying to be solved for years? What is that new way of doing things? And I think it's beyond just like drones and things like that, but it's really thinking about that fast forward.
Can I see? Yeah. So one of the one final question that any of you can kind of jump in with, kind of a tweetable tweet, but Tisha, you represent kind of a startup that's fast growing, but if you just think about Procter, Kroger, and Amazon, they're all here, and I've often wondered, boy, if like 5% of their budgets went towards the startup economy, we could change everything. And we kind of, you know, we built a platform around sustainability. Do you think there's like a really big idea when you think about the buyer power of Procter, you know, Kroger's impact? You got the CEO saying zero hunger, zero waste. They're building a fund behind it. And then Amazon, which really doesn't have a choice, right? It's like they've got to, you know, everyone, if you're blowing up e-commerce, you got to get really efficient with packaging and sustainable everything. Is there just a really big idea under our nose that could change the way everyone on the coast thinks about the great supply way of the Midwest? Who wants to go first?
Well, I'm happy to jump in. This is one of my favorite.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think that, you know, when you think about it and you think about the Great Supply Way, I think about it in two perspectives. One is the technology perspective and everyone requiring radical transparency. We've talked a lot about that within our groups. And things like blockchain technology would really, it would provide the consumer what they're needing, especially post-COVID, where they understand exactly where their food is coming from or their goods are coming from. They'll be able to see how many touches it was, how old is it, and really be able to see all of the different components. So being able to bring in blockchain technology, I think, into the food space is something that's really interesting. It would help us being able to co-locate, you know, from my perspective, being able to have an indoor farm next to a distribution center and eliminating all of that transportation definitely highlights the advantages of indoor farming compared to the rural space, or traditional farming. But bringing the big co's in, you know, so big co's have these supply ways. They have distribution and scale. And the little startups, we don't have the distribution and scale yet, but we have the innovation. I think that the big co's struggle with the innovation. We have companies like 8451, which has a tremendous amount of data and insight and data talent that we need to be able to share between the startups and the big co's so that we can figure out how to collaborate together. Because here in this space, we have Kroger, we have P&G, we have great startup technologies, we have 8451. If we could figure out how to get out of the way, let the big co's lead through distribution and let the startups help innovate to help them solve their problems, we could be a model area for globally for sustainable food production that's local, that is providing our consumer exactly what they need and what they want.
You're looking in from Boston. Big players figuring it out on supply. Is there an advantage here, or are we just dreaming?
So you're not dreaming. So let me just say, you know, it's an interesting thing. When I was switched from being like Tisha, I was an entrepreneur running companies, and then I moved over. My friends say over to the dark side of investing and venture and joke around. But they asked me, you know, what I've seen that's different when I look at both coasts and when I you know, look at places like Cincinnati and the culture around collaboration between large companies and small companies. I have to say, historically on even the coast, it's been a little bit contentious where people don't trust as easy. And particularly in traditional tech. My first VC firm job was in a large tech fund, and I was a little bit different doing manufacturing stuff. And we moved the needle in part on the coast. I think areas like pharmaceutical and biotech does a good job of collaborating between small and large companies. But if you look outside of that, there's not that natural culture of collaboration. And so when I think about Cincinnati and I look at the culture, I think about the previous session you just had, and even in listening to Tisha talk, and I think about, you know, when I've talked to Procter & Gamble and just the openness and just the willingness to share some of their own ideas and be creative and step forward. And if you can build on that, I mean, and I can probably say the same for other companies in that region. If you can build on that opportunity to build a different culture, it's even as big as what Tisha said. It's even bigger. It's beyond just supply chain, which I think is absolutely right. It's the spirit of collaboration between small and large companies. And if you can do that in manufacturing and get that in the supply chain, not only will Cincinnati be successful and unique, it'll be a blueprint for the rest of the country.
Outstanding.
There's no blueprint yet.
Leo, I love you to death, but I'm going to give you 2 tweets to wrap it all up.
No, Well said. Well said.
Tweets to round it all up, and then we're going to move on to our next session.
All right. One final tweet. Well, first, thank you to everybody. Carmichael, you are spot on. Tisha, spot on. I think there is more to come. There is a lot of things that we've got in flight, I think, from an idea perspective. So stay tuned and get involved. That's all I would say.
Thanks to all of you. Great panel. I appreciate your commitment, and we're going to build something huge together. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Now, moving on to our last panel segment, I am really thrilled and honored that one of the Cintrifuse practically co-founders, the board chair, my boss, Valerie Shepard, is going to lead a discussion with entrepreneurial luminary Brad Feld, who many of you know has written many books. I'll let Valerie kind of do the intro, but we're going to close with a discussion on ecosystem building, which is what we're all about and has been a recurring theme in every panel. So Valerie, I hand it off to you. You have the floor.
Thanks so much, Pete. I am incredibly excited to have Brad Feld here. Many of you know Brad. He doesn't need much of an introduction since he's done so much in this space, but he's currently the co-founder of Foundry Group, and he is the managing director of Foundry Group and the co-founder of Techstars. And importantly, he's a real friend of Cintrifuse. We have had Brad here with the Techstars a few years ago as we did FounderCon. And so he got to spend some time, as our old CEO, Wendy would say, in our dirt. And we really appreciate that. So thank you for taking the time. I'm going to spend some time talking about your new book and asking you some questions. And as you can see, I've dog-eared this quite a bit because I think it's an excellent book. So thank you for that. But before we get into the book, I just wanted to ask, how are you doing in these crazy times? I noticed one of your blog posts was about simply begin again. And I think that was great advice. So I just want to say, how are you doing?
I like it. Valerie, it's great to see you, and welcome to my kitchen.
Hey, it looks very fancy.
I like to answer the question, how am I feeling, instead of how am I doing?
Yeah, that's a good,
Yeah, in my first company, in the 1980s, we outlawed the answer okay. Because whenever somebody said, how you doing? They'd say, okay. It's like, yeah, something's seriously wrong. Let's dig into that. So I like to answer the feeling question. Today, I feel pretty good. My personal life is great. My wife, Amy, and I love being together 24 hours a day. We're at the end of the spectrum that likes being isolated. So there's positives around that. At the other end of the spectrum, professional life, work is in many ways very good. But at the other end of the spectrum, the world is really screwed up, and the inequities that we're dealing with across many different dimensions of our society and our species are front and center. And I live in Colorado, and I've been very deep since the COVID crisis hit in a number of things. Wendy Lee has been an amazing partner on the economic front with a new nonprofit we created called Energize Colorado, which is helping all companies in Colorado with under 500 people survive and thrive through the pandemic. So it's kind of bimodal. Like there's some elements that are really good and some elements that are really challenging and distressing. And so, the comment we started with was simply begin again. Is I wake up each morning, I meditate, which is a habit of mine now. And then Amy and I do something we've been together 30 years that we never did, which is we spend 15 to 30 minutes having coffee together each morning, and just sitting and talking. We have no kids. And so it's just a chance to wake up together, which has been fantastic and also very recalibrating for the day ahead.
Yeah, that's great. I really sparked to your how are you feeling versus how are you doing. I know with my husband, when he asked me and I say fine, that's our code word. It's not fine. So, so I totally get that. So let's talk a little bit about this book, which I feel was written expressly for what we're trying to do here in Cintrifuse in the greater Cincinnati area. So really, really appreciate it. We're going to make sure all of our board members get a copy of this book. There'll be many opportunities for those of you that are participants to get a copy of the book, and I really want you to study it, especially the Cintrifuse team. That's as your board chair, you guys, this is required reading. So let me ask you a few questions about it. First, you talk about the difference between a complex and complicated systems, and how understanding those differences can help us trying to improve our communities. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Let me define a complex system with an example. And so that there's some context for it, we've built the Startup Community Way on the premise that startup communities are complex adaptive systems. And we just shortened that to complex system for clarity, because we're having to read 500 times the phrase complex adaptive system will cause your head to explode. There are three types of systems that are relevant: a simple, a complicated, and a complex system. And I'm going to define them with an example. A simple system is making a cup of coffee. You put beans and water in, you get coffee out.
Yep.
Right? It's a deterministic outcome. It's a simple recipe. The steps could be slightly different. You could add milk or sugar, but beginning, end, you get coffee. It might not be good coffee, but it's coffee. A complicated system is doing your monthly financial statements. Bunches of steps. They don't have to be done in the same order, but there's a deterministic outcome. At the end of every month, you get an income statement, a balance sheet, and a cash flow statement. So there's a recipe with a deterministic outcome at the end of the month.
And as the chief accounting officer for Procter & Gamble, I can certainly assert to that. It's very,
you get it, right? Like every month.
Yes, complicated.
You have
Yes.
teams of many people doing many things and typing many things, but at the end, you know, the board, you get it. You get an answer. A complex system is raising a child. We've all been children or have children. If on day one, you say to that child, here's what you're going to do when you're 25. This is going to be your profession. These are the sports you're interested. These are the foods you'll like. This is the kind of movie you'll go to. This is the kind of person you're going to be in a relationship with. This is where you're going to, on and on and on. Kind of the only thing you're doing is setting that child up for lots and lots of therapy, right? The inputs that you have with that child generate outputs that generate sort of new dynamics, which generate inputs, which generate outputs. And this is the essence of a startup community, is that you don't have a recipe. There is no playbook. There is no deterministic outcome. There's lots of things going on, and those things going on are impacting all the other things. And in many ways around the notion of complexity, the interactions between the parts are much, much more important than the parts themselves. So in this book, we don't teach people how to think about complexity theory. If you know something about complexity theory or you're interested in it, there's an enormous amount of stuff on that. Really emerged in the 1980s from the Santa Fe Institute in Santa Fe. But we've introduced the language of complexity theory into the ideas of how startup communities grow, develop, and evolve. And that's really foundational, because so much of what I got in the 4 or 5 years after the first Startup Communities book came out, this is a sequel, in 2012, when I came out with Startup Communities, 5 years later, 2016, 17, 18, people started saying, I've been at this for a while, what now? And if you remember the Boulder thesis, I started with the idea that you had to have at least a 20-year view. And so there's a little irony that 5 years in, people were saying, what next? But it wasn't that surprising, because as humans, we're looking for a roadmap. We're looking for a playbook. We're looking for a recipe. And Ian Hathaway and I, as we sort of dug into this and looked at lots of methodologies and lots of frameworks and reflected on things that were happening in lots of different places, we concluded that a startup community is a complex system. There is no methodology. There is no playbook. There are lots of things you can learn and apply from other startup communities, but it's going to apply in unique ways to yours. And using the language and theory and understanding of how complex systems evolve, and evolution is a part of complexity theory. So it's interesting that that title is in both of the books, is foundational.
And there's a couple chapters, different chapters in your book that kind of follow on with that. So, for example, the measurement trap you talk about and the myth of quantity that you talk about. I think they're all very relevant to this complex system. Can you just expand on those two concepts a little bit?
Sure. One of our favorite chapters after the book was finished. You know it's a favorite chapter when you know the chapter number because you're referring to it a lot. What is the chapter called The Measurement Trap? And Ian and I went we really hard on trying to make it very accessible without punting on the issue, without being dismissive. So a natural thing that we do in any system is we measure things. And we're constantly measuring things to show our progress, but also to compare ourselves to other systems or other, we're Cincinnati, how do we compare to Cleveland? Or how do we compare to Des Moines? Or how do we compare to Boulder? What we realized very early on as we looked at all the different measurement methodologies that people were using across the world in different startup communities and sort of being frustrated and annoyed by many of them because they just weren't very good. We realized two things. One is we fall into this measurement trap, which is a business cliche. And the business cliche is if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And it's attributed to Peter Drucker. There's a lot of history behind the quote. That quote, the cliche today is actually wrong. And it's applied incorrectly in many businesses, and it's something you learn a lot in startups. If you don't measure the right things, or if you don't measure the important things, you can't manage them. So that modifier is critical.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
It turns out that in most measurement systems, people measure the easy things. And if everybody here is a business person, think about the situation you're involved where you measured something for a long period of time. It became very routine. You felt like it was helping you make informed decisions. And it turned out to be completely the wrong input, completely the wrong thing to measure. Or even more complicated when you look at companies that have real shocks of some sort, whether they're exogenous or whether they're just, misexecution in the business. But yet everything seems like it's going well because you're measuring all this stuff and it all is a lagging indicator that indicates that things are going well. So Ian and I focused hard in this chapter on explaining different measurement approaches, and more foundationally, in a startup community, I said it earlier, I'm going to repeat it. The interesting thing is not the parts. So measuring the parts, number of companies, amount of financing, number of unicorns, amount of VC dollars, stuff like that. That's fine. It's the easy stuff to measure, but it's not the important stuff to measure. The important stuff to measure is the interaction between the parts. And in a network, and if you follow my writing and know me, you know that my whole world runs off of a network model versus a hierarchical model. In a network, it's not just the number of connections you have between nodes in the network. And if you think of people as nodes, Valerie and I have, some number of connections. I have some number of people connected to me, and I'm connected to some number of people. Valerie's same, and we're connected to each other. It's not just the number, but it's actually the multiple of the number times the value of the information that goes across those connections. So if you think about that, the product of the number times the value of the information, the example would be if you've got tons of connections, you're in a startup community and you're connected to everyone, but the value of what crosses those connections is very low.
Right.
You're of no value to that startup community. If you have 3 connections, but the value of the information is incredibly high, you're of no value to the startup community because you're totally isolated. And so that measurement is extraordinarily difficult, or that characteristic is extraordinarily difficult to measure. So that's the measurement trap. We get into these measurements where we're constantly justifying behavior or patting ourselves on the back because of certain metrics that we're measuring that don't really have that much to do with what's happening. They're not essential to the behavioral dynamics of what's causing the startup community to grow. The other line, which is, the myth of everything, it's a cliche. It's an easy one, right? More of everything is what we strive for in many aspects of business. And, if you study Buddhism, like I do, or if you are reflective on what makes success or what doesn't make success, you pretty quickly recognize that more of everything does not equal success. It is particularly a characteristic today that's a striving characteristic that we have as a society. We need more of this, we need more of that, we want more of this, we want more of that. Sometimes more is good, but many times that's not the actual thing that generates successful futures. And so falling into the more of everything trap when combined with the measurement trap is fascinating, because you end up in this place where you're just trying to get more everything. And you're trying to get more everything of the easy stuff rather than focusing on the hard things that really make a difference over a long period of time for your startup community.
Sort of akin to the myth of multitasking, right? You think you're getting so much done when really you're doing stuff when you're very focused.
I love that you made that linkage, Valerie, because I want to say it. Zoom, I hope in 6 months of this has taught everyone in business this. There is no such thing as multitasking. It's nonsensical BS. What you're doing is you're distracting yourself from doing the actual deep thinking on things. And so you create this illusion that you're able to get a lot done because you're touching lots of things, but you're actually not engaging in anything deeply. And if you are serious about making progress on stuff, it's important to engage in things.
Yeah. Well, I see that Pete's on now, so he's giving me the hook and you the hook, I think. But we started later, Pete, so
I know
that. The one comment I wanted to make to you as I read this book, and being part of a very big multinational company, I find those measurement trap, myth of quantity, that's true no matter what kind of organization you're in. And so I do encourage those, even if you're not a part of the startup community, but you want to access it, please take this book and read it from cover to cover, and start acting because of it. I don't want you to just read it. I want you to start implementing this stuff. So any last comment, Brad?
Yeah, I'd love a last comment on that thread, because I think you highlighted something that was one of our goals, and it makes me really happy to hear it from somebody else. The foreword to the book was written by Eric Ries.
Mm-hmm.
Many of you may know Eric. He's a longtime friend. He wrote a book called The Lean Startup, and then his sequel was called The Startup Way, which applied lean startup methodologies to businesses of all sizes, large corporations. This is an homage, this book and the title is an homage to Eric. And when we came up with the title, after coming up with some really terrible titles like The Next Generation for all our Star Trek fans, and I'm a much bigger Star Wars fan than Star Trek fan, so all of mine were like Star Wars titles. I reached out to Eric and I asked him if he was okay with us calling this The Startup Community Way, because our goal, Ian and I's goal, was not just to abstract and extend what I'd done in 2012, but it was to help introduce this approach to businesses of all sorts and sizes, and to integrate the notion of networks and complexity theory into the way that we build communities within all sizes of business, not just startups. And so it's awesome that you picked up on that, because that was one of our goals. And so hopefully it's helpful to others.
And Brad, we've got you on the docket tomorrow for more. I mean, we could talk to you forever. We have a whole conference, the Brad Feld conference. But tomorrow at 3:30 p.m., Eric Weissman's going to be having another conversation with you. So we're thrilled to tap into all your experience. And Valerie, thanks for leading this discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
We're going to wrap up. I wanted just a couple comments, and then I want you to stick around for a final video that I think really is a wonderful entrepreneurial love letter to Cincinnati, but also something that I think will empower all of you to spread the word. I mean, Cincy has abundant opportunities to be an epicenter and blueprint for the company and the world. You know, as we learned today, from innovative partnership with government leaders, massive diversity opportunities, massive supply chain and sustainability opportunities. They're just huge advantages in a collaborative culture. We have more ingredients to magic sauce than any other city or region. We'll never get a bigger or more urgent opportunity to set the trajectory for the future. That was the theme of today. And I want to leave you with a video we put together as part of our FinTech series. First time we're ever going to share it, but it really speaks to the broader opportunity. And a big shout out to Western and Southern and Fifth Third Bank for being the sponsors of that critical initiative. Eric, let's run the video. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Don't leave until you watch it.
A thriving startup community is important for Cincinnati because Cincinnati has always been a driving force for innovation throughout our history. Cincinnati, again, is ripe to be that engine to help drive innovation in this ecosystem. We have great universities, we have great companies to all fuel that energy. And so when that technology comes about and the new innovation comes about, you can feed those directly into the large corporations that touch the world every single day.
Having a thriving startup community in Cincinnati is critical for our long-term economic vitality. As an individual and a working mother who moved here after almost 2 decades living and working in Manhattan, I found myself in Cincinnati. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this place. First, it's the heartbeat of the nation. When you come to a community like Cincinnati and the greater Cincinnati region, what you find is everyone is willing to help. And it's why I brought my family here. It's why I moved my career here. USA Today ranked us as one of the top places for millennials to live. The second year I moved here from New York City, the New York Times had us in the top 10 list of the 52 places to visit in the year.
We have a half a dozen Fortune 500 companies, and 3 of those are financial services and insurance. You've got companies like Procter & Gamble and Kroger, who are at the epicenter of retailing, branding, and customer understanding. And companies like these, they're going to be your customers, your investors, your mentors.
So customers, talent, and money are the 3 things that a startup needs. And you'll find all of those here in Greater Cincinnati. So in this instance, if you want to talk about FinTech, we've got a concentration of InsurTech and FinTech here, from Western Southern, Cincinnati Financial, Fifth Third Bank, US Bank, PNC. They all have a significant presence here in the Greater Cincinnati region.
A lot of companies these days do lean on startups. And specifically within FinTech, there's a big trend for financial services companies to lean heavily on partnerships with FinTechs. And a good startup ecosystem of domain expertise, technical expertise, kind of pushing the boundaries into what's new, is ultimately the future wave of how big corporations are going to continue to evolve and invest into new technology and new ecosystems. The corporations that are headquartered here, Fortune 500 kind of focus, they bring a lot of talent into the city and they stay here.
Cintrifuse is a startup catalyst that combines services for startups, a syndicated fund of funds of about $115 million in invested capital, and services for big companies to help them think and act like a startup. I'm a California native. In fact, I went to school in the Silicon Valley. I my company in Cincinnati because the advantages are absolutely tremendous. Cost of living, supportive ecosystem, access to talent, access to big companies that are hungry to do pilots.
There's no better place to invest in the United States than in the Midwest right now.
We are looking for great startups that want to be part of our community, about building our region, but also about building our business.
So I would recommend any entrepreneur that wants to be able to start a business in a place that isn't going to break your bank and also has a tremendous ecosystem around it and can give you your work-life balance. Cincinnati is definitely the place for you to consider.
Aspiring Fin InsurTech entrepreneurs out there, come to Cincinnati. We'll welcome you with open arms, and we'll do everything we can to help you ramp up really, really fast. So there you have it. Thanks for joining us. We are so indebted to all of you across the many different stakeholder groups, entrepreneurs, corporates, VCs. Thanks for tuning in. Keep in touch. Please spread the word to every entrepreneur out there, or even someone who is kind of finally looking to side hustle a big idea, that we're here to help in any way we can. Thanks so much. We will have this recorded. So if you want to share it with your employees or other stakeholders, let us know. We want to spread the good word in every way we can. Thank you.